Hello everyone, welcome back to the Tent of Abraham. I'm Tamir Kreisman from Jerusalem, Israel, and we continue with Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. This is chapter 9, Creation, the fifth day. You guys ready to get weird? It's going to get weird. Okay, let's go. On the fifth day, he caused the waters to bring forth abundantly all kinds of winged fowls, male and female, clean and unclean. Does this make sense? Do the winged fowls come from the water? I say winged. Okay, you get it. Yes, they do, though. The whole theory, of evolution is not exactly a theory. It's not all true either. The problem is, this theory falls flat when it comes to man. First of all, if anyone says that we came from monkeys, you could definitely say you most likely did come from monkeys. Because where did monkeys come from? Maybe we'll talk about it in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer once we get there in the in chronological order. But monkeys were not created in the 6 days of creation. We'll talk about that. Okay. Anyway, so you see, you can say that life had developed and evolved because clearly the 6 days of creation are not the 24-hour period the way that we know it, right? The fact that the sun and the moon were created on the fourth day proves that. And then it was called this for the day and that for the night, and yet we're counting days before that. But when it comes to man, there is no evolution. If anything, there's a devolution, right? Because Adam used to be, an incredible spiritual being, and then we got back to this. Now we're working on ourselves now to go back to what it was. Chadesh Yameinu Kekedem. Okay, so God created man, and from man, woman was created. This is how woman was created. Okay, from man. When we look at all the other creatures, God created Zachal v'Nekeva bara otam. Male and female, he made them, but man was man, and then, the rib, take it out, and there we go. Although in the beginning there was male and female, Zachal and Nekeva bara otam, they were together as one back to back, Adam and his first wife, she who shall not be named. Don't do that to yourself or your children or anything, just shh. So unlike any other creature, which is why it specifically mentions here male and female were created on the fifth day. By two signs are they declared to be clean, by the crop and by the craw peeling off. Now in this case, this refers to the Talmud Masechet Chulin 59a in regards to the kosher and not kosher animals and their signs. The signs that indicate that a domesticated animal and an undomesticated animal are kosher were stated in the Torah, and the signs of kosher bird were not explicitly stated. But the sages stated certain signs in a bird. Any bird that claws its prey and eats it is non-kosher, right? Predators. We don't eat anything that eats other animals, whether they're flying or whether they're on the ground. Any bird that has an extra digit behind the leg slightly elevated above the other digits, and a crop, which is a sac alongside the gullet in which the food is stored prior to digestion, and for which the yellowish membrane inside the gizzard can be peeled, is kosher. So they already know this. Now remember, these laws were given to Moses. This is part of the oral law. In other words, it says, this is kosher, that's not kosher, and then this is the breakdown. How did they know this? They didn't have all the types of fish in the sea and all the birds in the air and all the beasts of the field right there in front of Moses. It was shown to Moses exactly what it was. So Moses fully understood it. That's how he gave it to Israel. Rabbi Elazar, son of Rabbi Tzadok, says, any bird that splits the digits of its feet when standing on a string, placing two digits on one side of the string and two on the other side, is non-kosher. Coming back. Okay, so that's from Masechet Chulin. Now we're getting back Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. Rabbi Eliezer said another sign was also by the projecting toe of the claw. Two kinds of birds have been chosen for the offering of a burnt sacrifice, namely the turtle dove and a young pigeon. The Radal explains that from all the kosher birds, these two specific birds were selected, and even when it is said in Genesis 8:20, it says, Vayven Noach Mizbeach. This is when Noah here. I'll read the English and we'll go to the Hebrew. And Noah built an altar to the Lord, and he took of all the clean animals, right? And of all the clean fowl, and brought up burnt offerings on the altar. Hebrew says, Vayal Olot. So Mikol Ha'of Hatao, he took from, it didn't mean all of them, meaning from all the kosher animals, he took these two specific ones. He did not take all he didn't start sacrificing chickens and turkey and all that stuff. And goose and duck. They're delicious, but no. Vayal Olot, this coincides with the Hebrew from Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer, where it says, Ushnei minei ofot nivcharu. Two types of birds from all the kosher birds were selected lekorban olah, vayal olot. Eluhen tor, turtle dove, ubnei yonah, and the what do you call it? The young pigeons. So, like we said, we got chickens and ducks and goose and turkeys and so on. Only these two were selected to be korban olah upon the altar, right? We don't see anywhere in the Torah that, no one was eating Thanksgiving turkey back in the day. Still kosher, but only those two on the thing. Okay. On the fifth day, he caused the waters to bring forth abundantly all kinds of fish, male and female, unclean and clean. By two signs are they declared to be clean, by the fins and by their scales, and if they do not have them, i.e. both signs, they are unclean. So just again, this is how we started the read. I'm just going to go back. On the fifth day, he caused the waters to bring forth abundantly all kinds of winged fowls, male and female, clean and unclean. So in other words, he already starts with the birds, and then in the next verse, that's where he says, on the fifth day. So he continues, on the fifth day, he caused all the waters bring forth abundantly all kinds of fish. Now he's talking already about the fish. So first it's the fowls, then it's the fish. And they all come from the water. Now, did you notice the text? On the fifth day, he caused the waters bring forth abundantly all kinds of winged fowls. And now we have the fish, meaning they all came from the same place. Remember that. All this is very self-explanatory, and we can see these laws of kashrut in Parashat Shmini in the book of Leviticus. It's also my bar mitzvah parsha, so I know this one. But what's not there is everything we just mentioned and will mention comes from the water. So let's see what else. On the fifth day, he caused the waters to bring forth abundantly all kinds of locusts, male and female, clean and unclean. By two signs are they declared to be clean, by their long legs with which they jump, so you got locusts, grasshoppers, and whatnot, and by the wings which cover the entire body, such are clean. So yes, if you didn't know, we can eat locusts and grasshoppers. They are actually high protein. We actually have one at home. My cousin got it. It's really mamash, they're kosher, and the thing is every generation has to keep eating it and making a bracha she'akol on it to keep this going. So he gave an arena one, and I'm like, maybe I'll show it to you guys and eat it on camera. And then I'm looking at it, and it's a dried up thing, and no, just the thought of it. So sorry, I'm not going to eat a locust, call it a bug, but whatever. No, we're continuing. Such living things, but they are kosher. I heard they're like potato chips, crunchy. Okay. Such living, but if we get hungry and it's the apocalypse and God brings the locusts, then that might just very well be our food. Such living things as were brought forth from the water, namely fish and locusts, are eaten without being subject to the laws of shchita. You don't need to properly shech them. Obviously, you kill them, but you don't have to shech them with a ritual slaughtering. But the bird cannot be eaten unless it is killed by the method of the shechita, the kosher shechting. This is also common kosher knowledge. But this next part is peculiar. Such creatures which have been created from the earth have their blood covered with earth, and such as have been created from the water must have their blood poured out like water. Even the Radal asked the question that I hope we are all thinking here. Did we not just learn that all the birds originated from the water? Right? Okay, if so, then should all the kosher birds that we eat, should their blood not just be poured out like water? Based on this analysis, he understands that there is a part missing. See, this is how they know, because they know the kosher laws. This is halacha from Moses at Sinai. They know this. This is being passed down from generation to generation. So if this part is not in here, that means by default it's missing. Not that Rabbi Eliezer Hagadol made a mistake. Chas v'shalom, he did not make a mistake, especially now with the laws of kosher. They know these things backwards and forwards. It is a way of life. So that's why he's saying, based on the copies of the book and how old they are, it's most likely it's missing. Because we know, absolutely, blood is off limits. This, this is written already in the 5 books of Moses. So saying, oh yeah, you could eat you don't have to pour it out. You pour it out in the water or you could eat it. No. Which means that it should have read like this. Such creatures have been created from the earth, have their blood covered with earth, and such creatures have been created from water, must have their blood poured out like water, except for the fowls of the air, that although they were created from water, we pour out their blood and cover it with the earth. Now, the word that will come up in the next section, next part, is sheretz, which means either reptiles, creepy, crawly things, insects, or varmints. Okay, that's what a sheretz is, vaishretzu, meaning they multiplied like. Okay, so when attributed this term sheretz to people, it's not a favorable thing. Okay, it's like, anyway, I'm not going to start. Okay. So, for instance, Exodus 1, 6, and 7. Now, Joseph died as well as all his brothers and all that generation. The children of Israel were, look what it says in English, were fruitful and swarmed. Swarm is one of the words. And swarmed and increased and became very, very strong, and the land became filled with them. Ubnei Israel paru vayishretzu vayarbu vayetzamu bimeod meod vatemale haaretz otam. They multiplied like varmints, like cockroaches, like insects, like creepy crawly things, right? Did God just compare his children, the children of Israel, to swarming insects, reptiles, or varmints? No, of course he did not. What are we reading right here? This is the viewpoint of the Egyptians. And this is apparent by the very next verse, verse 8. A new king arose over Egypt who did not know Joseph. Friendly relations are over. Now look at these guys. They're multiplying like cockroaches. What are we going to do with them? So, thanks for saving our lives, our economy, and growing us into the most powerful nation and empire on the earth. But things kind of got to change right now, you Jews. And just like boiling a frog in water always starts with slowly. First, take a nice bath. Ooh, it's nice, it's cool. And slow, it's getting comfortable room temperature, a little bit warmer. Before you know, those bubbles start. The frog's not going anywhere. The skin comes off its body. That's how they got them back there in Egypt. That's how they're getting us today in the world, because it's slowly. So okay. So, just like you turn up the heat slowly, so too did the Egyptians do to the children of Israel. And you know the rest of the story. In fact, I believe I discussed it. I don't recall when, though. But I was very angry in that teaching, I know, because it's exactly when this whole, the last problem that we had before the next one that's coming out, and how they were, to get the magic cure. And so what do? You have first the leaders. So you have the prime minister coming in, receiving the magic cure on camera before everyone to see, although the whole thing was so shady, it didn't really happen. Nevertheless, Pharaoh himself started working hard labor. Pharaoh himself, along with all of Israel and every man from Egypt, and slowly but surely, one after the next, all the Egyptians, every single day, one less Egyptian, until only the Jews were left slaving away. That's how you do it. You start by example from the top, and before you know it, you're a slave to the system. 2022. So, and God destroyed everything that Israel had done for them. Because again, Joseph was who built up Egypt. God destroyed everything that Israel had done for them and gave it all to Israel in the end, as they all left. They left Egypt with all the gold and all the silver after destroying their economy. and killing all their firstborn, not to mention the countless deaths along the way. So for the word sheretz, we will either translate it now going forward as infest or swarm, okay? It'll just be easier for us. Rabbi Eliezer said, not only concerning the water alone does the scripture say that they will infest, swarm, or multiply, but also regarding the nations of the world who were likened to water, as written in Isaiah 17:12. Woe to a multitude of many peoples, like the roaring of seas they roar, and a rushing of nations like the rushing of mighty waters they rush. Oi, oi, oh, oi, hamon amim rabim, kahamot yamim, ocean, seas, yamim yehimayun, usheon leumim, kisheon mayim, kabirim yasheon. Now, as we know, since the world was created for Israel, it is Israel who will govern the world. We have also learned that Israel are also called Adam. So when we read Genesis 1:26, we have a very good idea of things to come. ויאמר אלוהים נעשה אדם בצלמנו כדמותנו, וירדו בדגת הים ובעוף השמיים, ובבהמה וכל הארץ ובכל הרמס הרומס על הארץ. And God said, let us make man in our image, after our likeness, and they shall rule. Because again, this is Genesis 1. In Genesis 2, that's when we see Eve coming in. Genesis 1 is what's-her-face. They shall rule over the fish of the sea. Nations are likened to the sea. Fish of the sea, fowl of the heaven which come from the sea, and over the animals on all the earth, and over all the creepy things that creep upon the earth. Everything. The Radal brings forth some interesting points here. As the nations are likened to the aquatic life, he writes that just like one fish always eats another fish, and so on, so too do the nations. There's always a bigger fish out there, and they will always eat anything, or in this case, anyone, that they can. True story. Now, there's another Kabbalistic look at creation. Not only that the 6 days of creation corresponds to the 6,000-year timeline of the world, with the 7 being Shabbat, this already we know, but more specifically that each creation day, each day of creation, meaning what was created that day would be manifest in their corresponding millennia. For instance, man was created on the 6th day. Very specifically, when was he created? At the end of the 6th day, 3 hours before Shabbat. 3 hours. In other words, he just had to make it into Shabbat, and all would have been well, right? But he didn't last the 3 hours before the sin took place. And what do we know is supposed to happen on the 6th millennia right before the end? Mashiach will come. You see, the name Adam, stands for Aleph Daled Mem, Adam, David, Mashiach. Boom, boom, boom. There you go. So in other words, if it was 3 hours before the end of the millennia, you guys do the math. When is Mashiach supposed to come? When is the last time that Mashiach could come? And so on. If you do these calculations, you might be able to get an idea, but because we're off in the timeline, you're going to get various different results. Like I said, don't dwell on it. But it's still fun to do. Like I said, we're a lot closer than what we think. But let's go to the 5th day now, right? So what happened on the 5th day, meaning last millennia, because that's where we're at right now in the teaching. So let's read the verses themselves. Genesis 1:20, and God said, let the waters swarm a swarming of living creatures, and let the fowl fly over the earth across the expanse of the heavens. ויאמר אלוהים ישרצו המים שרץ, נפש חיה. You see that? Swarming. It's not a good thing, but that's what comes out of the waters. So yes, this does speak of the creatures, but it also alludes to the nations, as we had discussed. Verse 21, and God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that crawls, with which the waters swarmed according to their kind, and every winged fowl according to its kind. And God saw that it was good. Why was it good, even though technically speaking, spiritually speaking, this is bad? Because everything comes from God, both good and bad. ultimately, together, it is perfect. You see, we know this. So, got the great sea monsters, Hataninim Hagdolim. Don't worry, we'll get to that. So who are the great sea monsters that appeared in the world starting from 2,000 years ago until this day? Now we know what happened in the 5th millennia. Who are the two great empires that appeared, the two great sea monsters? That would be Seir, Edom, and Ishmael, meaning Christianity and Islam, just like creation, the great sea monsters. So it's a fish eat fish world, and the two biggest fish in the sea are the Christians and the Muslims. Truth. Okay. These are called the wars of the great monsters. Okay, Milchamot Hataninim. And just as the waters brought forth abundantly on the 5th day, likewise in the future will the nations of the world swarm, infest, and they will fight one another to destroy, as it is said in 2 Chronicles 15:6, and nation was crushed by nation and city by city, because God discomfited them with all troubles. V'chuteto goy begoy ve'ir be'ir. Now, ir be'ir, it does say city by city, but this actually means kingdom by kingdom against kingdom. Ki Elohim hamemam bechol tzara. God put that on them. This is a direct reference to what is the kingdom, though. What are they fighting over? The kingdom, which is Jerusalem. Okay? Still the most sought after and fought over piece of real estate in the history of the world. Jews make up the majority of the inhabitants, while the Christians own some of the most expensive prime property, and the Muslims are sitting on Temple Mount. It's insane. So because the creatures, the nations that infest upon God's children, Israel, and his city, Jerusalem, primarily the two sea monsters, Christianity and Islam, God will make it so that they are crushed by one another. And and this is exactly what's been happening. Where do they butt heads all the time? It's only been over Jerusalem. You got the Crusades and then the Ottoman Empire and back and forth and Salahuddin and whatnot. So right now it's a whole big mishmash, but God's clearing house soon. So what does the very next verse in Chronicles say? But you be strong. He's talking to Israel. But you be strong and let your hands not slacken, for there is reward for your work. Ve'atem chizku ve'al yirpu yadechem. Lerapot is let loose. Don't loosen your grip. We've discussed this before. It's difficult to always brace. But this is what God is asking for. But it's not just like, you have to also be proactive. It's not just like wait to defend, okay? Ki yesh sachar lepulatechem. Everything you do is counted. Everything you do. Nothing that you've done for the sake of God, whether you were in idolatry or not, if you do it with a pure heart, and God wakes you up and brings you out, the whole guilt and everything, those things will turn into blessing, because everything you did is now being rerouted. It's being taken away from where you actually gave it to. You thought you were giving it to God, but it was going to the Sitra Achar like we discussed. So do you hear that, Israel? All these things are going to take place, and God is going to destroy them for messing with his kids. Bottom line. How are we going to get through it? Through everything that's going to happen. Be strong and let your hands not slacken. What are we to hold on to for dear life? Please turn to Proverbs chapter 3, starting with verse 17. Its ways are ways of pleasantness, and all its paths are peace. What are we talking about? It is a tree of life for those who grasp it, lamachazikim ba, and those who support it are fortunate. What do we discuss in this verse? Those who support those who learn and teach Torah. Like we said, if you cannot learn or teach Torah yourself, you support those who do. You have the same stake in holding on to the Torah. They're holding on to the Torah, you're holding on to them. That's how this works. And we're all connected. The Lord founded the earth with wisdom, established the heavens with discernment. With his knowledge, the depths were split and the heavens drip dew. We're talking about creation here, right? My son, let them not depart from your eyes. Guard sound wisdom and thought. In other words, see, understand. What are we saying over here? What are we talking about in our group? Look at the beauty of God everywhere in everything. If you see that, then you understand that everything is perfect, even what might seem like a calamity. And they shall be, all right? Guard sound wisdom and thought, and they shall be life for your soul. Well, nafshecha, for your nefesh, and grace for your neck. Although it says gargeutecha. Gargeutecha is, sorry, hold on, I have a neck. It's this, right? It's your windpipe. Okay, this is your neck. Anyway, then you shall go securely on your way, and your foot shall not stumble. This is a few verses before this says, trust in the Lord in all your heart, with all your heart, lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will set your paths, which are crooked by default because they are yours, straight, which means even if you go down something that is crooked by default, it will straighten itself out for you because that's that connection that you have. Then you shall go securely on your way, wherever it is that you go, and your foot shall not stumble. But how? Grasp onto that Torah. That's what you got to do. You grasp onto that Torah. Your foot shall not stumble. If you lie down, you shall not fear. What do we do when we lie down, right? When we're not on top of the world, if you will, when times of trouble. You shall not fear. And when you lie down, your sleep shall be sweet. It's okay. You got bills to pay? Grasp onto that Torah. Watch miracles happen. Be not afraid of sudden terror. It's coming. Or of the darkness, the wicked, when it will come. Kitavo. When? Kitavo el haaretz, when you come to the land. This dark, you say what I say. Again, be not afraid of sudden terror, because it'll come suddenly. Yes, there's a slow boil, but when it comes, it's coming. What's going? Look, God said this. It's okay. It's okay. Or of the darkness, the wicked, when it will come. Okay? We have been told this is going to happen, so no surprises here. And even when we are surprised, still no surprise. For the Lord shall be your trust, and he shall keep your foot from being caught. End of story. Let's continue. As all the rivers that flow on the earth, they are good and blessed and sweet, and they give enjoyment or pleasure to the world. Now we have a basic understanding of this, but we should break it down for appreciation. Why are they good? Right? It says they are good, blessed, and sweet. Why are they good? Because this water can and is used for vegetation. It's good for the earth. A great example of this is the River Nile in Egypt. Take a look at Google Earth, right? And just look at Egypt. Egypt is just desert. But if you look at along the river, you see the green populating both sides, and that's where all their population density is located. Even when it comes to the end at the top, it breaks off into small rivers. Look at all the green over there. So that's why it's good. So these rivers around the world are good for all the trees. Why is it good for the trees? I mean, aside from the obvious, what do the trees do? In addition to giving food, they also produce oxygen, right? They give food to us. They give food to all the beasts of the field and the birds of the air. They also give shelter to the wildlife. Keeps the world going. And the best example of that is, let's say, the Amazon River, okay? It's a jungle out there. It's not friendly for people. Why is it blessed? For purity reasons. Mivrach is for purity reasons. A mikveh is the foundation of a Jewish home. If the wife does not immerse herself in the mikveh during the appropriate times, she is forbidden to her husband. This is one of the few cases in the Torah that are so strict This is called Yehareg Ubal Ya'avo, meaning that it is better for a man to choose death rather than transgress this command. You cannot be with your wife until she's done with her cycle and then waits 7 full days and then immerses herself completely in a mikveh, going through the purity ritual. Only then, for that period of time, can a husband and wife be together, okay? You choose death over doing it improperly in the Jewish home. It's a sad state of what it looks like today, but yeah. During the time spent in Egypt, the women would go dunk where? In the Nile. That means these waters bring blessing to the home. So when the Jewish women were dunking in the Nile was a blessing to all of Egypt because it was a blessing to the Jewish home. You see how that works? So that's a blessing. Now, why are they sweet? Because we drink sweet water. How do they give enjoyment or pleasure to the world? Well, because showers or baths, whatever your thing is. We bathe in sweet water, right? Which is not the same as a mikveh. It has different purposes. Now we continue. When it flows into the sea, now we're continuing. When it flows into the sea, they are cursed, bad, and bitter, and they are of no benefit to the world. Now, if you're thinking, but can't we use the ocean saltwater as a mikveh? The answer is yes, you actually can, because it has to have a fresh supply of rainwater within that body of water. So the ocean, it definitely cuts it as a mikveh. If you need to go to a mikveh, there's no mikveh around, go dunk, but you have to be completely naked. So that's why, if that's the case, go at night, whatever, you figure out. I don't need to help you with that. You figure out with those details. So the ocean is okay as far as that goes. But what our sages say is that swimming in the ocean or salt water like the Dead Sea is specifically for health reasons, meaning we're not talking about the blessing. It is for health reasons. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that the sea itself is cursed. Everything has to be read with understanding and context. The reason it says cursed, in this case, it says me'urim in Hebrew as opposed to arurim or mekulalim, is not because they are cursed per se, but because of the effect that they have on the sweet water as a whole. That's why. It says the oceans eat the rivers. Now this will all make sense. So we know why they're bitter, right? Because salt water. But cursed and bad, not because the sea itself did something. But listen to what it says in the Zohar, okay? The judgment of the world is bitter, and that takes away from the sweetness. We have used the term to sweeten judgments, okay? I've used it with you. We've used it through Torah. This can be done through Torah, through charity, other good deeds, and so on, right? Through the learning of the Zohar. It sweetens the judgments at the end times. But it says that the judgments reside in the ocean, in the seas, and they are drawn to the lower sea, the abyss, if you will, and that is the dwelling place of the Sitra Achra, more specifically, Adam's first wife, now Satan's wife, and the mother of all evil. She who shall not be named rests in the depths of the sea. You want to go swimming? Which is why the sea is not able to receive the Shekhinah, just as Jonah said that he will flee, and this would be from the Shekhinah. If I flee from the Shekhinah, I know that the Shekhinah does not reside in the sea. Now look, he obviously knew better, and God's reach is everywhere, but the story of Jonah is not what you think it is. Hold on. But when we are desperate, scared, or angry, we do irrational things, just like everyone. He was a man after all. Now, the governments of the world claim that we have explored no more than 10 or 15% of our oceans. First of all, they're lying to you. Second of all, why do you think that is? The lower you go, be it on land or at sea, the lower you get. Let's continue. So too are Israel when they take refuge in the shadow and under the protection of their Creator. They are blessed and sweet, And there is some benefit to the world through them. Or there is benefit to the world, not some. There's benefit, again. Another reminder that God is in control of it all. So take a look at Isaiah 51, 15 to 16. I am the Lord your God, who wrinkles the sea and its waves stir. The Lord of hosts is his name. And I placed my words in your mouth, and with the shadow of my hand I covered you. To the plant, the heavens, and to the fount of the earth, and to say to Zion that you are my people. So even within the ocean, God covers us. The stirring of the waves are the judgments, and nevertheless, throughout these judgments, God's hand will always cover his people. Now, here's the realization that I had while I was reading and studying this, okay? This is my thing, but, we're sharing, right? Jacob's blessing to Ephraim and Manasseh in Genesis 48:16. May the angel who redeemed me from all harm bless the youths, and may they be called by my name and the name of my fathers Abraham and Isaac, and may they multiply abundantly like fish in the midst of the earth or of the land. Veidgu larov bekerev haaretz. Fish in the land. It never fully sat right with me. But we just learned that the fish also evolved into the fowls of the air. And where do the fowls fly? Genesis 1:20. And God said, let the waters swarm, a swarming of living creatures, and let the fowl, which came out of the water, fly over the earth across the expanse of the heavens. Israel will come out of the sea, out of the nations, out of exile, and they shall enter the land, the good land, the promised land. That's Israel, in case anyone has it twisted. And when the clock finally counts down and all the rectifications have been made, it is Israel who will fly over the earth into the expanse of the heavens. Now, this last part I've read in various Kabbalistic books, one of which we'll actually be discussing in our Zoom session, so stay tuned for that, you guys. You're going to enjoy that one. All this coincides with the very first exile. This would be Adam and Eve from the Garden of Eden. And when Israel depart from their Creator and trust in the statutes of the nations, they are accursed and bad, and there's no benefit in them for the world. Now, before we get into the nitty-gritty, only if Israel align themselves with the ways of the nations, then do they become accursed and bad like them, because the ways of the nations are accursed and bad, okay? Israel has a choice. But hold on, we'll discuss this whole nations thing in a minute. So these words by Rabbi Eliezer are bottom line for what can be seen in Jeremiah 10. Now, we have read this before, parts in previous series, but because it has been brought up in our chapter, here and now, this point in time, let's address it. Jeremiah 10, verse 1. Hearken to the word that the Lord spoke about you, O house of Israel. So we know when a prophet is speaking, when he speaks, it's of the future, hence prophecy. The children of Israel are split between the house or kingdom of Judah, and that would be the Jews today primarily, and the kingdom or the house of Israel, that would be the exile tribes, the 10 lost tribes, who were lost among the nations, primarily within Christianity. Calling all sparks, right? So says the Lord, of the way of the nations you shall not learn, and from the signs of the heavens, or from the heaven, be not dismayed, for the nations are dismayed from them. This is calling upon the 10 tribes specifically, but also Israel as a whole. We have discussed the signs of the heavens, over the last few teachings regarding the sun, the moon, and the stars. We know that if you can read the stars, you can actually predict the future, right? This went all the way up to astrologers today, to Nostradamus, to the Egyptians, back to Abraham. Everybody knew how to do it. And yet Israel, you shall not be dismayed by them. Why? Because Israel are above the stars. We've learned this. The constellations have no dominion whatsoever over Israel as they do to the nations, unless Israel places themselves as part of the nations. You see, it's the nations, it's the constellations, it's Israel, it's God. If you want to place yourself down here with the nations, then you are subject to the constellations, and whatever becomes of them, so shall your end be. Yes, I say end. Okay, now, we just read in Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, and when Israel depart from their Creator and trust in the statutes of the nations, let's take a look at verse 3 in Jeremiah 10. We're continuing. For the statutes of my peoples the nations, are vanity, hevel, blach. For it is but a tree that one cut from the forest in the handiwork of the carpenter with a small axe. Oh. As we discussed, and is also completely obvious to anyone with even one eye opened, okay, the wood, I mean, that represents Christianity in addition to a Christmas tree, but the cross, wooden cross and so on. Hey, it even threw in the carpenter over there. Why not? Don't do that. Let's read the verse again. For the statutes of the peoples are vanity, for it is but a tree that one cut from it's the whole thing, this is the vanity. Hevel havalim akol hevel, as we discussed. Okay, so verse 8, we're going to skip over. We don't have all day. But with one thing they are brutish and foolish. The vanities for which they will be punished are but wood. In Hebrew, it doesn't say etz and etz. Etz is a tree, and etz is also wood. It's the same word. Verse 15, they are vanity, a work of delusion. At the time of their visitation, they shall perish. Now, the word they translated for visitation is pekudotam, as in the time of Pekidah, right? When God will remember his children and begin to tear apart the nations that had afflicted them. So this is happening simultaneously. So, yeah. And so this verse can be read in two ways. One, at the time of the nation's visitation, the nations shall perish. And two, at the time of Israel's visitation, the nations shall perish. Bottom line is, the nations shall perish. And here's God dropping the mic. Verse 16. Not like these is Jacob's portion, for he is the one who formed everything, and Israel is the tribe. The tribe. Again, V'Yisrael Shevet. There are 12 tribes, but altogether we are one. Like we've taught before, we just need to get the 12 tribes together, and then there will be no more tribes. There's only just one. And Israel is the tribe of his inheritance. The Lord of hosts is his name. Again, not like these is Jacob's portion. Jacob has nothing to do with any of these carpenters or the woods and none of that stuff. Notice it says Jacob, not Judah, not Israel, but Jacob. Why Jacob? Because that is the starting point of all the 12 tribes of Israel. This spot as Israel must be earned. And we have discussed this plenty, so let's move on. Just as the waters of the rivers are the food of the sea, because they eat them, so will they be food for the fires of Gehinnom. We already explained the difference between sweet water and salty water. In fact, the waters have different consistencies, the salt water being thicker and heavier than sweet water, especially if you go into the Dead Sea, because of it's so rich in minerals, it looks like you just poured oil into there and kind of stays on you, but it's incredible healing properties. That's why it's different functions. But the bottom line is this. Once the sweet waters, Israel, fall into the salt waters, the nations, they are lost. They become part of the nations, and they are destined to end up in the fires of Gehinnom, just as the nations are. And no, let's make it clear right now, Noahides are not included in the nations. They are a group unto themselves, near and dear to both God and Israel. Again, where it says, and the nations will come together. These are the remnant of the nations. These are the Noahides, okay, from out of the nations who have supported Israel. When we read about Gel Toshav, what is a Gel Toshav? It can't happen today. There's no Gerei Toshav today. There's only Ger Tzedek. Ger Tzedek is a convert. Ger Toshav is a Gentile from the nations who lives within the borders of Israel, and they reap the benefit of living with Israel. All the blessings that come, they get it too. They're not required to keep the 613, but Shabbos, everyone keeps. Okay, let's go on. Difference. Don't get any funny ideas right now. Okay. Right. Okay. So we talked about the Noahides because I know people will be having those questions. So no, you guys are very, very cool. Don't even worry about it. So we're continuing. All the rains that descend into the sea are as seed for all creatures in them, and thereby the fish are fed. Now, if it weren't for constant rainfall all over the oceans, the sea itself would be way too salty for even the saltwater fish to live. Again, that's why the Dead Sea is called dead, because nothing lives in there. The rain, which as we have learned comes directly from God himself, sustains life even within the oceans. This is why it is said that the seed, meaning the multiplying and growth of the sea creatures, is also dependent upon the rain. The rainwater, i.e. fresh water, also carries higher levels of oxygen, which fish do need. The English translation says, and thereby the fish are fed. But the Hebrew, what does it say? Umehem hadagim mizdavgim. What does this mean? Male and female, making babies. When somebody says, I'm looking for my zivug, that's another way to say I'm looking for my better half, if you will. Now, let's see what other things. So again, you see fish are fed, but it's not fish are fed. It's fish are multiplied. You see the slight Hebrew and English can change a whole meaning. So let's see what other things Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer tells us that happened on a Thursday, because we are talking about the fifth day. On the fifth day, the waters in Egypt were changing into blood. That happened on a Thursday. When Moses got the call, it was 1 year before the Exodus, exactly. And he delayed 3 months before returning to Egypt. Every plague had a full month of warning for its coming, and then, of course, the plague itself. So every plague had its own month. So that's 9 months. But wait a minute, I thought there were 10 plagues. What about the 10th and final plague? They already had that warning from the very, very beginning. If we look at Exodus 4:22 and 23, before Moses even returned to Egypt, God told him what his first conversation with Pharaoh would be like. And you shall say to Pharaoh, so said the Lord, my firstborn son is Israel. So I say to you, send out my son that he will worship me. But if you refuse to send him out, behold, I am going to slay your firstborn son. There was your warning right there. It all came down to this. 9 months and countless warnings later, Exodus 12:29, and it came to pass at midnight, and the Lord smote every firstborn in the land of Egypt, from the firstborn of Pharaoh, who sits on his throne, to the firstborn of the captive who is in the dungeon, and every firstborn animal. He went like literally all your firstborns of everything. And what day, or rather night, of the week was this? On the fifth day, our forefathers went out of Egypt. Meaning it was like a Wednesday night, because Wednesday night is Thursday. There's a Yom Chamishi, which is already the beginning of the fifth day. On the fifth day, the waters of the Jordan stood still before the Ark of the Covenant of God when they entered Israel. On the fifth day, Hezekiah stopped the fountains which were in Jerusalem, or he kind of rerouted them actually, as it is said in 2 Chronicles 32:3. And Hezekiah stopped up the source of the waters of the upper Gihon, and he led them straight down to the west of the city of David, and Hezekiah prospered in all his works. So when you guys come to Israel, and please, Anarina will give you a tour of the city of David, and she will explain all about the significance of this passage right here, how it was done, and all the blessings that are brought. As we can actually still see most of the structure today, it's actually, you got to go underground, but you see where everything that we are reading right now, you actually see the exact structures. It's unbelievable. So in the meantime, all these examples, everything has to do with water, right? Blood turning to water, Joshua, water, rerouting the water. So what about the Exodus? Where did this come from? Anything? Okay, the Exodus took place 7 full days before the crossing of Yam Suf, which also took place on a Thursday, right? And oddly enough, it's not mentioned here, but they're all connected. Anyway, so just so you know, all these times and dates have been recorded and can be found in a book called Seder Olam, the Order of the World. Seder Olam Rabbah and Zutra, the big one and the small, it's all in the same book. Or it's called Eternal Order. Again, I don't think this is in English. I'm sorry. But Seder Olam, if you could find it, it's great. It'll give you all the dates and times of everything from the beginning until where? I think the first temple. No, after the first temple. So back to the Exodus and its connection to water, or lack thereof. Because Pharaoh, what's the connection here? Pharaoh is called a Tanin, i.e. a sea monster. Now, like we said in modern day Hebrew, Tanin is an alligator. And alligators were very common in the Nile back in those days. But Pharaoh, given his status as an evil titan, although he was little over a half a meter, that's actually was a half a meter. It's a little over a foot and a half. That's how big Pharaoh was, okay? True story. So this great titan, his power was destroyed on the day that the Taninim were created. And speaking of, okay, this great titan's power was, right, I wrote this, but it's been a rough day. So speaking of weird and wild creatures, okay, so his power was destroyed once the Makot began, because it started with the Nile. It took all his power away. On the 5th day, he brought forth from the water of the Leviathan, sea monster, but Leviathan. Okay, we'll get to this verse a lot. The flying serpent, dragon maybe, and its dwelling is in the lowest waters, and between its fins rests the middle bar of the earth. When I was reading this, I'm like, oh goodness, I don't have enough time for this. But there's so much that needs to be presented here. I'll try to get through it quickly without having your brain explode. Okay? So for starters, as we break it down, I'll have to bring in the Hebrew for the best understanding. First of all, there are 3 verses over here that refer, or several of them, I'll bring 3, refers to this in the Torah, as far as the Taninim Agdolim, and as far as what it says on the 5th day he brought forth the Leviathan and the flying serpent, okay? But it doesn't say that in the Hebrew, we'll get to that too. So first one is Genesis 1:21, Vayivra Elohim et ha-taninim hagdolim. And God created the great sea monsters and every living creature that crawls. Okay, so we've been through that. Isaiah 27:1. ביום ההוא יפקוד השם בחרבו הקשה והגדולה והחזקה על לוויתן נחש בריח ועל לוויתן נחש עקלתון והרג את התנין אשר בים. On that day the Lord shall visit with his hard and great and strong sword on Leviathan, it says here that it's translated the bar-like serpent, and upon Leviathan the crooked serpent, and he shall slay the dragon that is in the sea. Ezekiel 29:3. Daber ve'amarta כה אמר אדוני אלוהים הנני עליך פרעה מלך מצרים התנים הגדול הרובץ בתוך יאוריו אשר אמר לי יאורי ואני עשיתיני. Speak, and you shall say, so says the Lord God, behold, I am upon you, O Pharaoh, king of Egypt, the great, it says here, crocodile, Tanim, the great serpent, or whatever, the Tanim Hagadol, that lies down in the midst of the rivers. It said Ye'orav. The Ye'or is alluding to the Nile. It says going into the Ye'or, who said, my river is my own and I made myself. In other words, Pharaoh, when Israel were in Egypt, he said, I am a god, I created myself. And so what was the first thing that happened? When did the rivers actually turn to blood? Moses was standing there with Aaron, and a bunch of the elders from Israel and the Egyptian wizards came to see Pharaoh, who relieved himself only once a day to show that his people, hey man, I don't need to go to no bathroom. I'm a god, right? So, anybody get that? So anyway, so they caught him doing his things right there. Like, hey man, how's it going? What do you hold? What? Don't let it go, man. So basically, Pharaoh relieved himself in the water before all the people, thereby not only humanizing him, but also making a fool out of him. And then the blood started while he was still in the water. Yeah, anyway, good times. Okay, let's continue. We already spoke about Pharaoh being considered a large Tanin, although it says here Tanim. And of course, there's the story regarding the big fish and even bigger fish in the book of Jonah, which we will get to in the next class. And please stay tuned because you're not going to want to miss this. But now you need to understand who these players are. We discussed 3 of them in the last verse from Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer. There is one Leviathan, which in modern day Hebrew we call Leviathan is a whale. Okay? Because as far as we know, the whale is the largest sea creature that we have seen, and biblically speaking, Leviathan is the largest creature created in the world. 2, the great Taninim, also translated in English as the sea monsters. In modern day Hebrew, Tanin is an alligator or a crocodile, as we have said with Pharaoh and that explanation. And 3, the Nechashim, the serpents, straight up. So in our study, we see the verse mentioned only one kind of serpent, translated as a flying serpent, mistranslated, okay? Although it doesn't say all that in the Hebrew. The Hebrew says Nachash Bariach. What is Bariach? The locks on almost everyone's door here in Israel, the company is called Rav Bariach. The Bariach means a lock or a latch or a bar or a bolt. That's it. Almost every door in Israel, it says Rav Bariach. So this is Nachash Bariach, a locked, latched, or bolted serpent. Now this is the serpent that it says is within the firmament, who swallows its own tail. You see those pictures of a rounded serpent eating its own tail? This is Nachash Bariach. And this serpent is who you would actually call Satan, the Samech Mem. But what about his wife? She who should not be named. She is the Nachash Akalaton, the crooked or windy serpent. They are 2, perhaps like the one wrapping itself around the pole. And now all this and the very brief explanation that I am giving you here are from various different books that you don't need to be reading. So I'll try and make it as light as possible. You're going to be left with a lot of questions, but I'm going to relay this information to you. Okay? But like I said, light. Okay. The Leviathan is God's personal plaything in a good way. This is what it says. Mesachek bo. So in other words, it's how it describes the Leviathan. It's the same way that God describes Messiah ben Ephraim, Mashiach ben Ephraim, aka ben Yosef. Okay, haben hayakir li Ephraim. And the word is lesachek. Modern day Hebrew, lesachek, it means to play. Hey, ta rotze lesachek shachmat? You want to play chess? Okay, but it's not the complete meaning. When we play, it brings us joy. When God is playing with his favorite son Ephraim, it says, even more so, when we play with our children or grandchildren upon our knees, that gives us nachat ruach liyotzreinu. It gives us great pleasure. So the word comes from ischak, right? Yesachek, ischak, lesachek, same root, which is close to the word or the name Yitzchak, will laugh. The specific meaning of yesachek is that of overwhelming and uncontrollable laughter at the end, which comes from complete and utter joy. This is the longing that we have carried since, try laughing and crying at the same time. It's that. This is the longing that we have carried since forever to return to our place and begin building from there. This is what we say before we say Birkat Hamazon, after we have a meal with the bread on either Shabbat or on a Chag, on a festive day. So please open Psalms 126 and listen to the words that we just sing through, but I'm going to explain them to you. This is all about the coming of Mashiach and God's visible return to Zion. A song of ascents. When the Lord returns, the returnees to Zion, we shall be like dreamers. Hainu kecholmim. What? This is no way. Is this happening? Someone pinch me because I must be dreaming. Okay. Then our mouths will be filled with laughter and our tongues will with songs of praise. Here's the word. Azimale then will be filled. Schok. Not tzchok, not tz with a tzaddik, with a sin. Schok pinu, the schok of our mouths. Uleshonenu rina. Then they will say among the nations, the Lord has done great things with these, meaning with Israel. And now we say, the Lord has done great things with us. We were happy. Ainu semechim. Return, O Lord, our captivity like streams in arid land. See, streams of sweet water, like we said. Those who sow with tears will reap with song. For the last 2,000 years, everyone has been sowing with tears. But those who have gone through, those who made it through the Chavlei Mashiach and see this, there isn't anything that can prepare you for what is to come. He will go along weeping, carrying the valuable seeds. He will come back with song, carrying his sheaves. Now, I got to tell you, for a moment, when I had my thing in 2015, I got a glimpse of this last verse. Haloch yelech uvacho, weeping. That broken heart weeping, turning into laughing and unimaginable joy. Still weeping, but it's just, okay. Anyway, the flesh of this, going back, the flesh of this Leviathan will be a feast for the righteous, and its skin will be made as a sukkah. This is the sukkah. And what is the food of the Leviathan, who is also called the Tanin Hagadol, the great sea monster? All the great sea monsters in the sea are the food for the Leviathan, in Pirkei Rabbi Eliezer. So this is what it says in our text, meaning that this Leviathan is going to eat, consume the Taninim. But I thought there were only 2 Taninim. And then only one, since God had to kill the male so that they won't reproduce. How about separate and not kill? Which is how we get the 2 serpents. One in the firmament and the other one down here in the deep, like we discussed in the beginning of the class. So I need to tell you that there are many Taninim, and they are currently food for the Leviathan on a regular daily basis. These are not the Samech Mem and his wife yet. That's the main course and the dessert in the end. Who are all these Taninim Agdolim that the Leviathan eats every day? These are their minions. That's right. Not the cute, adorable little guys. Banana. Not those. Now remember what we said of its dwelling place? And its dwelling place is in the lowest waters, and between its fins rests the middle bar of the earth. 2 fins, 1 middle bar, or perhaps, hear me now, the central column, consisting of keter, crown, da'at, the knowledge of God, tiferet, the splendor of Torah, the beating heart, Yesod, the foundation of the righteous by which the world stands, Tzadik Yesod Olam, and Malchut, the kingdom of God here on earth, all together, this Leviathan consists of the middle bar with the 2 fins around the world. What if I tell you that Leviathan is Moses. The right fin is Mashiach ben David, and the left fin is Mashiach ben Yosef. You can take this information, you can do with it what you will, but this is the best that I can give you right now. And just another fun fact, okay? You're going to get a kick out of this, just to show you how other religions take from what is ours and turn the holy into mundane, the pure into impure, and so on. Just like we discussed in the last class regarding the true Immaculate Conception, and which is produced the birth of Israel, that you can read directly from the 5 books of Moses, and between the false narrative that the Christians built up for themselves, because as we know, the governing angel of Edom, Christianity, is Satan himself. And speaking of another faction of Satan, how about the self-proclaimed Satanists? Do me a favor right now. Google Leviathan pentagram, okay? And go, don't worry, images can't hurt you, okay? That's what they believe. Don't worry about it. Leviathan pentagram, and go to images, okay? So what do you see? There is the head of Baphomet, which is the head of a goat. What is a goat? Seir, Edom, Rome, Christianity. Some people still can't make that connection. Seriously. Like I said, you could think you're on the opposite ends, but you have the same employer. Like I said, you think there's a difference between Democrats and Republicans. We're fighting for this and that, and everybody's fighting for whatever, but the bottom line is, one entity is controlling both sides. So the same entity that is controlling Christianity is controlling the Satanists. That's it. One this side, one that side. You work for the same, you're paying taxes to the same dude. So all your efforts are going there. Anyway, you have the goat head, Seir, right? In the middle of a pentagram, which, by the way, the pentagram was the seal of Solomon. The 6-pointed star is the seal of David. The 8-pointed star was Abraham. The seal of Solomon, he used it to submit the king of the demons, including the Shem HaMefalash of God, and they turned it into a bad thing. The Satanists love the number 666. Why? Only because it's written in the New Testament as being the mark of the beast, right? You see, so like, where are they taking this from? So just like you know that this is false, you know for sure that that is false. Now, we've already disproven that propaganda of the New Testament 1,000 times over, when in fact, 666 equals 18, chai, life. But that's a bad thing, huh? Sure. Guess which both sides are worshiping death and staying away from life. Let's stay away from 666 but let's take that to a negative way. You see, this is also the exact number that Joseph, i.e. Mashiach ben Joseph, who is going to destroy Edom, Esav. Yes, Christianity. Yosef grew 6 amot in each direction, 6, 6, and 6, to protect his mother Rachel from the evil eye of Esav, Edom, Christianity. So just like we can say that what they believe is absolute garbage, since it is directly correlated to the other group who think that they're doing the Lord's work, is absolute garbage. I'm sorry, everything is connected here. Anyway, what are the 5 letters around the pentagram, specifically over the points? Leviathan, in Hebrew no less. Exactly. And they don't even count this group of Satanists. They're not a threat to us. Like, what are you're putting importance on them? Really? You want to worship Satan? At least they're not deceiving themselves like the other guys are, who are also known as the great Taninim, who, as we had learned, are Ishmael, Islam, and Edom, Christianity. As they eat up all the fish in the sea, they do, Leviathan is going to eat them. Every day it opens its mouth, and the great sea monster is destined to be eaten that day, meaning the Tanin that is destined to be eaten on that day, tries to escape and flee, but it enters the mouth of the Leviathan, and the Holy One, blessed be He, plays with it. Mesachek imo. This is what we said, meaning he doesn't play with it. He's not ha. He enjoys it. Psalms 104. This sea great and wide, there is creeping things and innumerable beasts, both small and large. There the ships go. You formed this Leviathan, which to sport. Yatzarta lesachek bo. So again, not sport, enjoy. They all looked up at you with hope to give their food in its time. Kulam elecha yesaberun latet ochlam beito. You give them that they may gather. You open your hand that they may be sated with goodness. God provides for everything, even the positive and what even is seemingly negative. God sustains all life. The Leviathan remains in the deep, and the great sea monsters are fed directly to him, meaning they swim right into his mouth because that is their function. Whether they want to or not, they're already going in there. Again, this is not a matter of free will. It's how nature, if you will, works. It is said, though, that once a year, the Leviathan rises from the deep, specifically in the month of Tevet, and when he does, all the fish in all the seas of all the world tremble. Remember how after Jaws came out, or whenever anyone here saw Jaws, you never went into the ocean again, ever? Yeah, so let's wrap this up. Rabbi Meir said, such creatures which have been created from the earth increase and multiply on the earth, meaning they do not multiply in the water. And such which have been brought forth from the water increase and multiply in the water, except, right, good, I hope you're thinking that, except all kinds of winged birds, which we know had come from water. So very good if you picked that up. For their creation was from water, yet they increase and multiply on the earth, as it is said, and let the fowl multiply in the earth, Genesis 1:22. This also coincides with the thing like v'yidgu larov bekerev haaretz. They will multiply like fish, but on land. Now there are a few exceptions here as to there are amphibious creatures like the sea turtle. He lives in the sea, but she comes to lay her eggs on land and then crawl back in the sea. The eggs hatch, and then you'll watch those, Discovery channels. It's like it's a life or death journey for them to just get back to the thing. Okay, so too, there's also the sea serpents, like sea snakes and whatnot, various lizards, alligators, crocodiles, and the like. Now, the Radal does say something fascinating about dolphins, though, aside from them being mammals who don't lay eggs. They are similar to humans. And I'm just going to say this, okay? The dolphins that can be found in some of these ancient books, I've heard a very interesting drash. They are not necessarily those which we know today, but they are actually described as being the top half human and the bottom half fish. What, you think the Little Mermaid is a Disney original? Where did Disney get all their stuff from? And where do you think they're twisting all these things from? The greatest satanic propaganda machine gets all its material from our books, ladies and gentlemen, including the Sword and Stone and everything else over there. But all that's for another time. So thus concludes today's teaching. There was so much here. If I go too much into these things, anyway. I'm really trying to keep to Pirkei de Rabbi Eliezer, give you as much information as possible without going completely off the rails. So please join me next week for a deep, deep dive into the story of Jonah like you have never heard it before. And in the meantime, everyone have a Chodesh Tov, have a wonderful rest of the week, have a Shabbat Shalom, and have a Chag Shavuot Sameach. I'll see you next time. Bye-bye now.